I think we're going to witness bank runs in months ahead. I think we're on the precipitous edge of a major. Some people think, oh, well, it's going to be a bad recession. Everybody's pretty much resigned that. That's baked in. Not too many people really believe we could have a depression. I do. So I guess it depends on how pessimistic you are. But having been in the government and spent my life in the military and knowing the people in charge, I think they're going to go back to war. And I think it's a disaster. All the bad things will be accelerated.
The headlines suggest the worst may already be behind us. Markets have stabilized, oil has pulled back, and many investors believe the crisis is beginning to fade. But retired Colonel Douglas McGregor believes that confidence may be dangerously misplaced. He argues that today's calm could be masking a much larger geopolitical and financial shift, one that could reshape global markets, accelerate economic instability, and make gold more important than ever. In this interview, he explains why he believes the real risks may still lie ahead.
And most people have concluded that the war with Iran is over, that somehow or another, miraculously, there will be no restart to the war, and that we are on the road or path somehow or another through negotiation to an end. I think that's premature, and I think it's misleading. But the interesting part is, particularly when we talk about gold, energy markets, the commodities in general, this kind of mentality or thinking has an impact. And I think you're aware that yesterday, after Donald Trump said that he called a halt to his impending strike on Iran, everybody concluded, see, the war's over, and oil suddenly, dropped in price, and everyone celebrated, and the rest is history. And I don't think that's really the case. And I think that it's very dangerous for people who are in the markets right now and are trying to track commodity to understand that this is definitely a pause. And you can come up with lots of reasons for the pause, but I don't think this is over.
McGregor believes the recent calm has created a false sense of security. His warning is that markets may be treating a temporary pause as if the conflict has ended, while the underlying risks remain unresolved.
I think the war in the Middle East is already regional. And increasingly, we're seeing what I would call three conflicts moving closer together, becoming one conflict. Now, one of those is clearly the war in Ukraine. And the reason I say it's coming closer is that President Trump has had an opportunity to put an end to this several times. He's the key player. To end the Ukrainian war, all he has to do is simply tell the Ukrainians, that's it. I'm not going to fund you anymore unless you're willing to sit down and talk peace, seriously. He hasn't done that. He said he would, but he hasn't. As long as he continues to indulge them with whatever amount of money or equipment he's willing to send, the Europeans will do the same. And the Europeans, of course, are ardent supporters. When I say Europeans, I'm talking about the governments, not the people. Because I don't see much evidence that anybody in Germany or the Netherlands or Scandinavia or anybody else wants to suit up and march east into war with Russia in Ukraine. So that's one war. The second war, of course, is what's happening in the Gulf. And this is now increasingly a regional exercise. Now, why would I say that? Well, we just had a meeting within the last few days that I think is very telling. You had not just the Houthi rebels in Yemen threatening a blockade of Saudi Arabia and the Red Sea, something which I think is likely to happen, and the United States trying to back out of Iraq and Syria, where all of the various U.S. bases were and our so-called Kurdish allies are located. You also have something else, and that is you just had a meeting in Jordan. It was effectively the Arab League Plus. So you had representatives from Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, Pakistan, Indonesia, Malaysia, all of them arguing for a unified diplomatic response. And their principal concern was obviously, please don't bomb anymore as far as Iran is concerned, but they're very concerned about what's going on in East Jerusalem, the Muslim holy sites, and the very aggressive position that the Israelis are taking. So I think what we're seeing now is this war is transforming into something much larger. I think the Islamic states are coalescing into an alliance of some kind, and that alliance is clearly on the side of Iran. So you have Russia and Iran, who are de facto allies, along with all of these Islamic states, all lining up now against Israel and the United States. Then there's a third conflict that we don't talk about, but it is a conflict. It's a cold conflict, and that's America's Cold War with China. And Americans, particularly in our government, don't understand the enormous influence and power that China has over what happens in the Persian Gulf. If they did, I think we would be talking directly to Mr. or President Xi, who would be in a position to help broker an end to this. But I don't think we want it to end, and so we're not talking to him. But more important, I don't think we understand how supply chains have now restructured and reorganized and reoriented away from where they were a few years ago. And there is this supposition in the American markets, I think in Europe to some extent, that if you can just end this war, everything goes back to the way it was. That's not going to happen. I think everyone who can reduce its dependency on oil, natural gas, and so forth, as well as its derivative products, is going to try and go that way. But I think at the same time, supply chains, supply structures always orient away from conflict zones. And that's going to hurt us as well as the rest of the world. And in the meantime, we still are playing this war against everyone and anyone we don't like with tariffs. I think that's been a disaster. That's caused supply chain changes that are not good for us. I think it's made things harder for us here at home. And I think on the whole, overseas, China, Russia, India, Iran, most other countries that have had to deal with any of our tariffs have all found ways around them. It's very similar to sanctions. We keep sanctioning people. Doesn't make any difference. People have gotten around the sanctions, or they've simply moved on to a different business model in different places to avoid them. So those are the three conflicts, and the real concern that we should all have.
His argument goes beyond a single conflict. He believes tensions involving Ukraine, the Middle East, and China are becoming increasingly interconnected, creating risks that could ripple through global markets and the economy.
They've got to throw us out. And that's clear. They've got to say, look, you can't protect us. We've come to the realization that's an unequivocal truth. And so you've got to leave. Please go. They haven't done that yet. And until they do that, they are at very high risk of being destroyed by Iran. So that needs to happen in the near term. That's a huge sea change, by the way, because China, which is heavily dependent upon Iranian oil and other derivatives, is going to profit enormously from this, as you know. And anything going to Russia or China or any of their BRICS friends is going to move rapidly through the Straits of Hormuz to these countries. But nothing is going to come to us, and certainly nothing will go to Israel. And again, you've always got to bring Israel back into the picture because this is effectively a Jewish war. There is no vital strategic interest on the part of the United States to put the Persian Gulf in the position it's in. Everyone had access to the Gulf before the war started. Everything was fine until we bombed. Why did we bomb? What was the pressing matter? The imminent development of a nuclear weapon? Well, for roughly 30 years, we've been listening to Mr. Netanyahu and his friends tell us we're two steps away from Hiroshima. The mushroom cloud is over the horizon. That's all nonsense and crap, and always has been. But it turns out they finally got somebody in the White House who would listen and buy it and embrace it. I think part of that is because Trump is under duress of some kind. I don't know what the duress is, but he's not behaving as I knew him back in 2020 at all. He made it very clear in private that what's going on right now is the last thing in the world that he wanted. Now he's gone in full-fledged, and we know that part of that is because, or at least a large part of it is because the Zionist billionaires funded his election. There's no question about that. And we've seen how powerful the money is. They've got two major funds. One is about 150 million. Another is almost 750 million. And these funds are designed to back candidates who will support Israel's agenda, whatever it is. And part of it is to drive people out of office who will not support Israel. So, you've got to look at that. And you saw, or you may or may not be aware of what happened to Representative Thomas Massey in Kentucky, being in the Congress for several years. And he made it very, very clear that he was not going to support any more aid to Israel to pursue and prosecute its war. Remember that Israel is at war at this point, in the words of Netanyahu, on 7 different fronts. It's at war virtually with all of its Muslim neighbors. And we are expected to fight that war for them. And that's what we're doing to a large extent. Although we're running out of missiles, running out of munitions, and we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt as we print more and more money. You said, where's an end point? I think we've passed the end point. This war should have ended already. We should have disengaged and gotten out and recognized, well, we were defeated. Why were we defeated? We can spend hours talking about that. But very simply, we were not prepared to fight the kind of opponent that Iran turned out to be. It's not only a very large and powerful country that's extremely difficult to reach, it's more important than that. They have capitalized on new technology, space-based surveillance, linked to all of these various weapon systems. We've been unable to defeat that, unable to counter it. So the smart thing would be to say, well, we can't turn this around quickly, so we better cut a deal and get out.
According to McGregor, the greatest danger isn't just the conflict itself. It's the lack of a realistic path to end it. He argues that without a clear exit strategy, uncertainty could continue weighing on markets and global stability.
I don't see how we can expect anything to be good in the near term. I think everything is going to be bad. And the good news for us, frankly, is that gold is going to be more valuable and more important than ever in our history. I just hope that people find ways to get back to mining it in volume and in new and different places, because we're outpacing the amount of gold that exists on the planet.
That's an incredible prediction, and I would love to pull that thread on gold a bit more in just a second. But before that, of course, I mentioned during the introduction that you joined the board of Palisades Gold Corp. And I'd be very curious to hear your perspective of why you have decided to join the board. What do you think sets Palisades Gold Corp apart?
I would say there are several things. One, it has a wonderful cash position. And right now, the cash position plus gold, those are the best things to have. I mean, you could certainly add silver. What is that, $62 an ounce? But the best things to have are lots and lots of cash and lots of gold. They're invested in all the right things. Then, of course, you have other aspects that don't come up much for discussion, one of which is uranium, which is a rare earth, as you know. And I think I mentioned this before. We desperately need more refineries to deal with the rare earths. And one of the byproducts of all of that is always uranium. And we need to supply uranium. We need to supply that ourselves here at home on the North American continent. And I also think that Palisades is beautifully positioned because it has one foot in Canada and another foot inside the United States. These two countries, and I know that recently we've had our disputes at high levels, and I would simply argue that that's very stupid, because North America can be a bastion of prosperity and stability, thanks to the mineral wealth. And again, I see Palisades Gold as positioned nicely at the center of that development. So as far as I'm concerned, it's all upward and beyond for Palisades Gold. And of course, you've got a very smart CEO that helps enormously.